And not isolating, yeah. I'm glad so many of you came out to see what we're up to. We're just launching this thing. We're going in all directions. The CD's done. We're working on the photo book. All the pictures you saw in there and all the video footage is all my stuff. And there's just more of it than we have time to share. But I'll share a little more from the book. Sergeant Marshall's Ordeal. It was early into Operation Mead River, early into December 1968, and much later than Sergeant Marshall realized. Now, I'm not saying anything against Marshall, not at all, no way. To the contrary, I was right beside him when 2nd Platoon cleared out dead NVA from overrun bunkers on September 29th. I remember him going head first, alone, into a freshly taken bunker, only to come right back out after emptying his M16, only to ask for a .45 to go back in again. There were 8 enemy soldiers inside. One of them turned his head to look at Marshall as he came around the corner. I remember him as a leader in battle, a hero. I also remember him as a lifer, as a prick. Of course, those are admirable qualities to older Marines, but to us kids, it was reason to be placed on the radar screen of our payback machine. And that is exactly what was about to happen to Marshall. Fox Company was set up along some serpentine riverbank as a blocking force, the noose tightening around a large bunch of VC and North Vietnamese soldiers, and they were worried and trapped and moving our way. We were the blocking force while other Marine units drove the enemy right towards us, just as our ancestors must have driven cattle to the railhead. The only difference was we were in the jungle. Those on watch along the riverbank manned a trench that no one quite fully could account for. Some said it was a former North Vietnamese trench, proving the enemy was thick here. Others said maybe the South Vietnamese army had dug it at some point along the way, or maybe even Americans from recent operations. The more romantic among us suggested it had to be the French long ago in the Indochina War, echoing the sound of some distant trumpet of universal brotherhood among warriors and heroes throughout the passage of time. Yeah, pretty juvenile, eh? But true, nonetheless. That's how we felt. During my first night there among the company command group, I was repeatedly awakened during that half-sleep, half-awake time, lying in my two-man hooch of plastic ponchos to the ever-so-gentle finger-prodding sensation to the portion of my body laying closest to the ground. With sleep being a rare commodity, I repeatedly tried to ignore the nearly imperceptible finger poking. I half dreamt that I was feeling it. Finally, in a thrashing, spinning, muttering motion, I rose up, rolled back the ground cover poncho, put the red lens on my flashlight, and shone it. It looked like an asparagus farm. Huge earthworms, having feasted for years on the corpses below us. Did I mention we were sleeping in a cemetery? Were sensing my body heat and seeking entry to the warmth they knew lay only micro inches away. I was disgusted, yet fatigued, so I slept. Don't ask what I dreamt. In the morning, it was sunny, pleasant, and we were set in. Nothing to do but wait and watch. Resupply was unusually bountiful and spirits were high. Hell, we only took an occasional sniper round and infrequent AK-47 bursts from the opposite riverbank, so we played cards, wrote letters, visited, and even had time to think. Ha! The very bane of every lifer. Never ever let the troops have time to think. Well, maybe they were weary too. We all were. After all, Fox Company was never one to play backseat to anyone, anywhere, anytime. As the day and the card games and the visiting wore on, so did the boredom. Ha, bane number 2. Never, under any circumstances, do you let the troops become bored. Too late. Sergeant Donnie Serwick, 2nd Platoon, my best friend, and I were hanging out, having finished a card game, and we were getting goofy, silly, and worst of all, creative. Don't worry, the bane thing stops here. Don and I noticed Sergeant Marshall sleeping in his hammock about 20 feet away. He, like many of us, had acquired a North Vietnamese hammock and used it for sleeping in to keep us off the ground. Refer to the sound asleep part before with the asparagus farm thing. Anyway, he was sound asleep in his olive green canvas hammock strung between two small tipping banana trees. He almost looked like a fellow banana in his hammock. How peaceful, how vulnerable, how tempting, how irresistible. There are two items I should mention here. First, Sergeant Marshall was totally obsessed with a phobic fear of creepy crawly things, especially slithery snake-like ones. Refer to the worm part of this story if you don't see it coming. Second, Sergeant Marshall had ingeniously created the means of his own demise by stringing a sort of clothesline directly over his head to his feet, from which was stretched, A-frame style, a second poncho, pegged down at the corners to make a shade, like an A-frame, over his hammock. Don and I got it at the same moment. We burst nearly out loud with impish laughter. Donnie hung up a bunch of foot-long worms the size of your index finger. Then, with the same nylon rope that once had tied the corners of the outstretched A-frame poncho to the pegs in the ground, I tied the grommet eyes of that poncho together underneath Marshall's hammock. He looked like a sausage or a tamale, wrapped in corn husks, or a hot dog in a bun in a wrapper, or a lifer right where we wanted him. It was great. Donnie and I poured literally dozens of the hideous flesh-seeking giant earthworm body hunters into both of the tiny restricted openings at the head and foot of Marshall's hammock taco. Then Donnie and I walked back to our little area about 20 feet away and pretended to be busy doing nothing in particular, sir. After motioning to all the surrounding troops to hush and say nothing, time passed. Occasional chuckles from the other Marines threatened to blow the surprise, but no, Marshall slept on quietly, peacefully, until then, through the plastic cover over the hammock, we observed what must have been an elbow, poking, prodding, moving, then more quiet, but we all knew it was about to happen, rustling, tossing, slowly at first, building a momentum and intensity that shortly gave way to screams and curses, wailing, flailing, ripping apart the entire banana taco tamale hot dog in a heroic final thrash, like a mix between Homer Simpson and the Married with Children guy. Amid the torn remnants of his hammock and poncho, Sergeant Marshall drew himself up to full height and command rank structure and screamed, "Who the fuck did this?" Everyone was busy doing nothing, sir, and ignored his rage. It was beautiful. It was nearly epic in payback proportion. The occasional chortlings and choking sounds of stifled laughter only heightened Marshall's commitment of delivering justice, but it isn't until now that he can know the rest of the story. Yeah.